Zawadi stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the pregnancy test clutched tightly in her trembling hands. Two bright lines glared back at her, confirming what she had been dreading. She pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it a storm of emotions, fear, confusion, and something she dared not name. Her fingers loosened, and the test clattered into the sink. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not like this. Her divorce from Baraka was still fresh, the wounds raw. How was she supposed to face him? And even worse, how was she supposed to tell him that she didn't know for sure if the baby was his? A sharp knock on the front door startled her. She took a shaky breath, wiped her eyes, and made her way to the door. Through the peephole, she saw Ajani standing there, holding a bouquet of red roses. His smile was easy, his stance relaxed, but something about him always made her uneasy. Still, she unlocked the door. "Zawadi," he said warmly, stepping inside before she could protest. "I thought I'd check on you. You've been distant lately." Zawadi forced a smile, though her mind was miles away. "I've been busy, Ajani. Work has been overwhelming." He placed the flowers on the coffee table and reached for her hand, his grip firm. "You know you can talk to me." His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, she considered telling him. But before she could say a word, another knock pounded at the door, louder, more forceful. Her heart clenched. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Baraka. Ajani glanced toward the door, his jaw tightening. "Are you expecting someone?" Zawadi hesitated, then shook her head. "No." Another knock, this time more like a demand. Zawadi swallowed hard, steeling herself before opening the door. Baraka stood there, his tall frame dominating the doorway. His dark eyes flicked past her, landing on Ajani, and instantly, the air in the room turned thick with tension. "What's he doing here?" Baraka's voice was low, dangerous. Zawadi squared her shoulders. "That's none of your concern." Baraka stepped inside, his presence overwhelming the small space. His gaze bore into her, and she could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." His eyes flickered to the pregnancy test on the counter. Zawadi's breath hitched as she realized her mistake, she had left it in plain sight. Baraka's expression darkened. "What the hell is this?" He strode past her, snatching the test off the counter. His fingers tightened around it as if he could crush the truth away. When he turned back to face her, his voice was a lethal whisper. "Is this mine?" Zawadi opened her mouth, but no words came out. The room was suffocating, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Baraka took a step closer. "Answer me." But she couldn't. Because the truth was more complicated than either of them knew. Baraka's grip on the pregnancy test tightened as his breathing grew heavy. His mind raced with questions, each more volatile than the last. Zawadi took a small step back, sensing the fury in his eyes. "Baraka, please," she started, but he cut her off. "You think you can just keep this from me?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Who is it, Zawadi? Who's the father?" Ajani stepped forward, his posture calm but assertive. "You need to calm down, Baraka." Baraka's head snapped toward Ajani, his expression darkening. "This has nothing to do with you." His voice was a growl, barely restrained. "Get out." Ajani didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere." "You're not going to intimidate her." A tense silence stretched between the two men. Zawadi felt trapped between them, suffocated by their unspoken battle for dominance. "I should have known." Baraka scoffed, turning his glare back to her. "You moved on that quickly." Zawadi's patience snapped. "This isn't about you, Baraka. This is my life. Baraka let out a bitter laugh. Your life. You're carrying a child, Zawadi. That's not just your life anymore. His eyes burned with a mix of rage and something else, something deeper. Fear? Regret? Before she could respond, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls trembled. Ajani let out a breath. Are you okay? Zawadi didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the door, knowing that Baraka wasn't done. Not even close. Zawadi sat on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The confrontation with Baraka replayed in her mind on an endless loop. The anger in his eyes. The disbelief. The sense of betrayal. She had known he would react badly, but this was worse than she had imagined. Her phone buzzed beside her. She hesitated before picking it up. A text from Baraka glowed on the screen. This isn't over. A chill ran down her spine. She locked her phone and exhaled shakily. It wasn't just his words that unsettled her, it was the certainty behind them. Baraka was relentless when he wanted something, and right now, that something was the truth. A sudden noise from her front door made her jolt upright. She listened, heart pounding. A creaking sound, like someone shifting their weight against the wood. She slowly got up and tiptoed toward the door. Holding her breath, she peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Her fingers hovered over the lock. Should she open it? She shook her head, stepping back. It was probably just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as she turned away, her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from an unknown number. You're not alone. Zawadi's breath hitched. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Who could it be? Baraka? Someone else? Her fingers trembled as she typed back. Who is this? No response. She swallowed hard and placed the phone on her nightstand, rubbing her arms against the sudden chill that settled in the room. She needed to calm down. Maybe it was a prank, or someone trying to mess with her. A sudden knock at the door made her jump. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Her blood ran cold. She crept back to the peephole, heart hammering. The hallway outside was empty. Backing away, she grabbed her phone and dialed Ajani. He picked up on the second ring. Zawadi. What's wrong? Someone's outside my apartment, she whispered. They knocked, but there's no one there. And I got a text. Stay where you are. I'm coming over. The call ended, leaving Zawadi in a tense silence. She sat back down on the bed, hugging her knees to her chest, every nerve on edge. Was Baraka going this far? Or was there someone else in the shadows, watching, waiting? All she could do was wait for Ajani and hope he arrived before whoever was out there decided to make their next move. 15 minutes later, a sharp knock at the door made her jump. She rushed to the peephole, Ajani. Relief flooded her as she quickly unlocked the door. His eyes scanned the room as he stepped inside. Tell me everything. She explained the texts, the noises outside, and the unsettling feeling creeping over her. Ajani listened intently, his jaw tightening. Then, he exhaled sharply. Zawadi, I need to tell you something. Her stomach dropped at the seriousness in his tone. I should have told you earlier, but Baraka has been keeping tabs on you since the divorce. She stiffened. What? Ajani ran a hand over his face. He didn't take the breakup well. He's been asking around about you, your whereabouts, who you're with. He's obsessed, Zawadi. She swallowed hard. You knew this and didn't tell me. I didn't want to scare you. Well, congratulations. I'm terrified now. Ajani stepped closer, lowering his voice. Zawadi, listen to me. You need to be careful. Baraka isn't the only one watching you. She frowned. What do you mean? I've noticed things too. Strange cars parked near your building, people looking away too quickly when I glance at them. Someone else is interested in you. I don't know who. The air in the room turned suffocating. I won't let anything happen to you, Ajani said firmly. Zawadi wanted to believe him, but deep down, something about this situation didn't feel right. The next morning, Zawadi stepped out of her apartment to find Baraka leaning against his car, arms crossed. He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach churn. She froze. What are you doing here? Baraka pushed off the car and strode toward her. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. She tried to move past him, but he grabbed her wrist, firm but not painful. His voice dropped. Don't do this, Zawadi. Her pulse spiked. Do what? Shut me out. Act like I don't matter. You don't get to control me anymore, Baraka. His jaw clenched. Who is he? She shook her head. This again. I told you. I don't believe you. His grip tightened slightly. I know you, Zawadi. There's something you're not telling me. She yanked her hand free. You're paranoid. Baraka exhaled sharply. Come back home. She blinked. What? Move back in with me. I can protect you. She scoffed. From what? You? From whoever's watching you. Her breath hitched. How do you know about that? His expression darkened. Because you're mine, Zawadi. And I protect what's mine. A chill ran down her spine. She turned and walked away, but she could feel his eyes burning into her back, his presence a shadow that refused to leave her alone. Zawadi locked her apartment door and leaned against it, her heart hammering in her chest. Baraka's words echoed in her mind, you're mine, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down her spine. She had spent years trying to break free from his control, yet here he was again, trying to pull her back into his grasp. But what frightened her even more was his knowledge about someone watching her. How much did he know? Her phone buzzed. Ajani. She sighed and answered. Hey. How are you? He asked, concern in his voice. Baraka was waiting outside my apartment this morning. Ajani cursed under his breath. Did he threaten you? No, but he wants me to move back in with him. A pause. Then, Zawadi, you need to be careful. If he knows someone's watching you, that means he's been watching too. Maybe he's involved. I don't know. He looked serious. Scared, even. Ajani exhaled. Come stay with me. Just for a few days. Zawadi hesitated. The idea of leaving her apartment felt like surrender, but she also didn't want to be alone. Fine. Just for a few days. I'll come pick you up. 30 minutes later. Ajani arrived, his eyes scanning the surroundings as she stepped outside. He didn't say much as he helped her carry a small bag to his car, but the tension in his jaw spoke volumes. When they arrived at his apartment, he led her inside. It was sleek and modern, but despite its luxury, it felt cold. Like a place meant to impress rather than comfort. You'll be safe here, he assured her. Zawadi nodded, but something about the situation felt off. She had escaped one possessive man, only to seek refuge with another. And yet, deep inside, she knew she had no choice. The first night at Ajani's apartment was restless. Zawadi tossed and turned, her thoughts tangled between Baraka's obsession and the eerie feeling that someone was lurking in the shadows. Around 3 a.m., a loud crash jolted her awake. She sat up, heart racing. Silence followed. Slowly, she climbed out of bed and tiptoed toward the living room. The lights were off, but the faint glow from the city filtered through the curtains, casting eerie shadows. Then she saw it. The front door was slightly open. Her breath hitched. She was sure Ajani had locked it before they went to bed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Her stomach twisted. Someone had been inside. She backed away just as Ajani stormed out of his bedroom, a gun in his hand. "What happened?" he demanded. Zawadi pointed to the door. It was open. Ajani's face darkened. He rushed to the door, checking the locks. "Nothing's broken." They had a key. Zawadi's blood ran cold. "Who else has access to your apartment?" "No one." Fear gripped her chest. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching them. Someone wanted her to know they could get to her anytime. And now, she wasn't sure if Ajani's apartment was any safer than her own. The morning after the break-in, Zawadi sat on the couch, gripping a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her mind replayed the night's events, the open door, the echo of footsteps, the chilling realization that someone had access to Ajani's apartment. Ajani paced in front of her, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care how much it costs, find out who did this," he barked at whoever was on the other end. His jaw clenched as he hung up. "I called a private investigator," he said, turning to her. "If the police won't take this seriously, I will." Zawadi nodded, but her unease grew. Something didn't feel right. She had spent the last few days caught between two possessive men, unsure who to trust. She decided to dig into Ajani's past. Later that day, while Ajani was out, she took his laptop from the desk in his study. Her fingers hovered over the keys before she typed his name into a search engine. At first, the results were what she expected: articles about his success in the tech world, interviews praising his business acumen. Then she found something that made her stomach drop. A woman's blog post. Dated 2 years ago. The title, "The Man Who Nearly Destroyed Me." Zawadi clicked on it, her heart hammering. The woman, whose name was concealed, wrote about a charismatic entrepreneur who had manipulated her into isolation, cut her off from friends and family, and controlled every aspect of her life. She described the slow descent into paranoia, the fear that she was constantly being watched. The relationship ended when she found out he had paid someone to follow her. And the worst part? She called him a. Zawadi's hands shook as she closed the laptop. Could it be Ajani? The timeline fit. The methods fit. And hadn't she already felt that same creeping possessiveness from him? The front door opened. She slammed the laptop shut and spun around. Ajani stood there, watching her. His eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to her. "What are you doing?" Zawadi forced a smile. "Just checking emails." Ajani studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Because I need you to trust me." Zawadi's pulse raced as she smiled back. But trust was the last thing she felt.